Hello and welcome back to the Wrestling Group on YouTube. We have a new series that I'm going to be trialing. See if you like it, see if you don't. Let us know, obviously, in the comments as usual. It's myself here, Ryan, as always, and I've got a guest with me from the Wrestling Group on Facebook, Scott Hunt.
Hello, everyone. My friend Jericho is joining us as well, just to my right.
Yeah, so what we're going to do today is we're going to have a little chat on Chris Jericho and his career. Like I said to Scott, I was looking at doing like a top 10 or a top 5 or something with Chris Jericho, like I have been doing with other people. But like Jericho's got over 30 years now, and to start doing, because he's such a character, you could do like top 10 gimmicks, you could do top 10 storylines, you could do top 10 funny moments, top 10 matches, top 10 championships. You could go on and on and on with Jericho. So I thought, I'll get someone on who's just as much of a Jericho fan as I am, and we'll just have a general discussion about his career and all the things that we enjoy as Chris Jericho fans. So hopefully you'll enjoy it too. So so I'm just going to run through, and as you all know, because you'll be Jericho fans as well if you've tuned in, but we're just going to have a quick go through and just list out some of his accomplishments that he has, like his championships and that. So he's got his one time. What's that?
This is probably going to take a while to list all of Jericho's accomplishments.
Yeah. So we're going to go for obviously the main companies. I'm not really too bothered about the Northern Eastern and stuff like that, but we've got the one time and the interim AEW World Champion. He's one-time Ring of Honor World Champion, one-time WWE Undisputed Champion, three-time WWE World Heavyweight Champion, two-time WCW World Heavyweight Champion, nine-time WWE Intercontinental Champion, one-time IWGP Intercontinental Champion, two-time WWE United States Champion, one-time WWE European Champion, one-time WWE Hardcore Champion, two-time WWE Tag Team Champion, five-time WWE World Heavyweight Tag Team Champion, and he's been a three-time Wrestler of the Year, voted on the Wrestling Observer newsletter in 2008, 2009, and 2019. So, I mean, I don't know about you, but there's no surprise for me about the 2008 Wrestler of the Year. I mean, when you think Chris Jericho, that's the first thing I always think of.
Same. That gimmick he had during that run. I remember him talking about, I don't know if you've seen the film No Country for Old Men.
No, I haven't.
With Javier Bardem. Javier Bardem plays a character in there who uses like these long words, and his speech is a bit slow, and that's where Jericho got the inspiration. When he was wearing the suits and his words were all slow down, he was using long words and everything. That's where he got that inspiration from.
Yeah, I remember him talking about it on the podcast. I haven't actually seen the film, but I mean, just the way he just obviously takes things from movies and stuff is just brilliant. And I thought that was one of his best gimmicks he did in the WA, was where he was dead quiet and he spoke and he was like, "I'm gonna hurt you," but it's like, yeah, but why are you talking quiet? But it really worked.
Yeah, and obviously he went from the long hair to the short hair. He went from the trousers to the pants then as well. He changed little things, but for him, they made a massive change him in as a character as well.
Yeah, and then obviously if you look at like 2008, again, some of his best matches from that time as well. Obviously, like one of my favorite Chris Jericho matches of all time is the ladder match against Shawn Michaels for the World Heavyweight Championship.
Oh, that's so good. That whole program was amazing. When he accidentally punched Shawn Michaels' missus as well. Whether that was, get me wrong, you could say whether that was meant to happen or not, But that's that whole storyline. And like you said, was that the unsanctioned ladder match, wasn't it? Where it wasn't an official match, or was that a different match?
I think so. Yeah, I'd have to go back and check, but I think it was No Mercy 2008.
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, I just remember. I can't remember if it was the ladder match. So I remember, was the ladder match on the same pay-per-view that they had the scramble match, and Jericho came out and won that at the end? I remember him. There was one pay-per-view where he had a match with Shawn Michaels, which he lost.
Yeah.
And then later on, he came out and won the scramble match, and he won the world heavyweight title in that. I think it might have been the first scramble match as well.
Yeah. So that was a different pay-per-view to the ladder match. But that was the same run.
Yeah,
that was where the run started, with the world title, because he just turns up right at the end, doesn't he? Bastard and bruised. And I think he just slips in and pins someone, and that's all he does, and everyone just
pretty much.
just
And he walks out like a scolded dog, as JR would say.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So, like say, I mean, Chris Jericho. I mean, he's done so much in wrestling. Like, I mean, just the companies alone, listing them off there, as well as the championships. You know, WCW, ECW. In fact, I think I've missed off the ECW because he was ECW television champion as well. I think I've missed that off my list. And then obviously done a small stint in New Japan and like say AEW, and then he's been Ring of Honor World Champion. So, you know, he's just done so much in his career. But yeah, so I mean, like say, I've been a massive Jericho fan for years now. So can you remember like when it was that you started first watching Jericho? Was it WCW or?
Yeah, it was WCW. I've been a wrestling fan since the early 90s, to be fair. And I remember seeing images of him and Lance Storm. I can't remember what it was on. But I was like, oh, you know, I can't actually remember looking back. But then when he joined WCW, the name rang a bell, if you know what I mean, but I couldn't really remember where from. Like I must have read it about him somewhere or whatever. Then when he was reading out, was it the 1001 Holds? That's when I suddenly started warming to him. I was like, oh, this guy's going to be big. I can just sense him going to be big. And I know he was obviously frustrated in WCW. And obviously when he had his debut on Raw, and then obviously the build up to that, obviously the millennium that was tied into, I just thought that was perfection. And for him to walk out on his debut show and interrupt The Rock at the pinnacle of how The Rock was literally unheard of and was just amazing, I thought.
Yeah, it's still one of the best debuts. I mean, there's not many that can compare to that for me, in terms of WE especially. But like I'd say, like I started watching wrestling, I'd say late 90s, which was WCW. We didn't have Sky Sports or nothing like that, so we didn't get WFC. WCW used to be on like Freeview channel, but I mean, loads of people can pinpoint like the first matches they've seen and the first pay-per-views they've seen and stuff. I never can, and like wrestling for me has always been there. I feel like I've always watched it. But it would have been around, I'd say, late 90s. And I did start with WCW, but I don't really remember. Like I've seen the clips, like I've seen that obviously, like that promo you listed, the 1001 Holds. I've seen that like a million times. And I've seen matches from then, but I don't remember watching it as a child. I remember watching it later on as an adult. So like the first real proper memory I have of Jericho is probably that Raw debut, because all my WCW memories have all just been NWO, because let's face it, 70% of WCW was NWO, wasn't it? So
Jericho's one of the few members who didn't actually join that stable, so yeah.
No, yeah, it's a shock, isn't it? But yeah, so like say that Raw debut was probably the first proper memory I have of Chris Jericho from watching it the first time. But yeah, he come in and made a big impact, and even people who didn't know who he was, like people were buzzing. They're like, "Whoa!" Everyone else seems to be excited. Why is everyone excited? Now I'm excited. It was just like, but again, like say, it's one of them. Like there's not many that I can think of that compare to Chris Jericho's debut on Raw. Like say, he's interrupted The Rock. Like The Rock was like the hottest thing in wrestling at that.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, I don't know whose decision that was or whatever, whether that was Vince's or whatever. And people say Vince doesn't always make the best decisions, but I'm guessing that was one of his decisions back then in 1999, and that was a bang-ass decision. And kind of like you said, to interrupt The Rock, you know, unheard of. And it made Jericho, and kind of like you mentioned as well, people might not know much about Jericho, but after that promo, that's all you needed to know who this guy was. Chris Jericho just interrupted The Rock. That's all you need to know, really.
Yeah, with that weird palm tree thing on his head.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, and then obviously if we skip forward a bit, like I said, I'm not just gonna go through his like career bit by bit, but I mean, again, like we're talking like 2008, it was like 2007, 2008 time when he returned after he left in 2005, didn't he? Done a couple of world tours with Fozzy. And then when he come back again, he done the video thing with the different, you know, Shavers, Y2J, when he come back against Randy Orton. And again, like they done it at first where people had forgot Jericho had done that back in '99. And there was a few small fans going, "Oh, it's probably Jericho," but so many people, and then it's like all the little things coming up online. They're typing it into the internet to try and find out what it meant.
And I remember he came out. So I was about to ask, was it against Randy Orton? And that reminded me, he came out in like this silvery kind of short vest top thing.
Yeah.
And I remember there was some guy who was carrying like a torch, you know, like when you carry him, like when you're racing or whatever, and he did his little pose like that and knocked the guy out. And then this thing got a massive cheer, and everyone, like you said, people would be like, "Oh, I think it's Jericho." People weren't guessing it was Jericho, but as soon as he came out and did that pose, you knew who that was.
Yeah, that's it. It's certain things that WWE can do, and they can do it well when they put the time and effort in. It's similar to like what they were doing with Bray Wyatt with the whole, the whole little codes, was it the QR codes or whatever?
Yeah.
Like, that went massive, didn't it? It was only about 2 years ago that they did that. And there is certain things that they put the time and the effort in, they can get right. And obviously his debut is definitely one. And another one, obviously, is when he returned against Randy Orton, save his Y2J. It was just a shame they didn't give him the belt at the time.
Yeah. Was that run when he came back? I'm trying to think. So one of my favourite feuds he had was with Rey Mysterio. I think that might have been about 2009-ish, when they had like a run of matches where it was like for the mask and it was over with the Intercontinental title, and it went back and forth. And I remember one match when it was for the mask, and he pulled the mask off, and he's like, "Oh, I masked Rey Mysterio," but then Rey Mysterio was sitting there with another mask on. I just remember that being such a good feud between those two.
Yeah, that was 2009. Yeah, she was about a year on from the re-debut, if you like, or the return. But yeah, I mean, like you say, he's had so many fantastic matches. I done the which what I was doing. I was doing a run through of Payback. It was my Payback one. And I watched the Chris Jericho and CM Punk match. Like, I remember the WrestleMania one quite well, but I didn't really remember the Payback one. And then when I rewatched it, I thought, you know what, this is a lot better than what I remember it being. Like say, CM Punk dominates for early on in the beginning, but then like Jericho kicks out of a go to sleep, and then all of a sudden the whole thing's turned on its head, and you're like, it could go either way now. You know what I mean?
Because was that the I know this is obviously about Jericho primarily, but was that when CM Punk, the same year that he faced Taker at WrestleMania, and he was gone for a few months? Because I remember the promos were just between Heyman and Jericho for that match, wasn't it? And then obviously Punk returned for pay-per-view.
Yeah, this was Punk's first match after losing to Taker at Mania.
Yeah, and the promos in the ring between Jericho and Heyman, obviously they knew each other from their ECW days, but they, those two of the best talkers in wrestling ever, like just one-on-one promos together was just amazing.
Yeah, like when like you're talking about like top promos, Jericho is, as well as being a top wrestler, he's got to be in line with top promos of all time. I mean, the things you can do on a microphone is brilliant. You can like the whole part where he was getting it. You say you're gonna get it, like the one word it, and it got over massively. People chanting it everywhere, the signs and everything.
And it's just the little things as well, like when he used to do the list promo. And it's just lifting up the pen and clicking it. And like, how do you get that over? And then you brought that up briefly back in AEW, just lifting the pen up, and they've got massive cheers. Literally, like you said, getting the word "it" over or lifting up a pen and clicking it. Literally, no one else could do that apart from Jericho.
Yeah. And it was the one in AEW. What was it called? Something like the lexicon of Jericho or something, wasn't it? Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's just brilliant, isn't it? When you look back, and he's had a fantastic career, and I don't know, like especially since going to AEW, because you've got them fans that no matter what AEW do, will just crap on it, and they won't accept that Chris Jericho, like in 2019, was voted as Wrestler of the Year again. We won't accept that, like at the age Chris Jericho is at, and the fact that he's ex-WWE guy, even though he'd been in like 4 companies beforehand, could still be like basically the best thing in wrestling at the time. Obviously we had a little bit of a bubbly, that was a thing that he didn't even try and get over, and it got over massively.
Yeah, that was so good. And people kind of maybe not so much when he was the first AEW world champion, but when he was the first Ring of Honor champion while it was under AEW,
Yeah.
people were moaning about that as well. But it made sense. Like for AEW, him being the first champ, his match was against Hangman Page, and that put Hangman Page over. And Jericho with the belt was a name value, and like you said, he was ex-WWE, so he was getting those fans over. He was bringing in new fans as well, and he did the same thing when he was Ring of Honor champion. I really don't get why people say either of those two decisions were a bad decision. For me, I know obviously as a big Jericho fan, so I'm obviously a bit biased, but even from a business standpoint, it made perfect sense for both of those.
Yeah. It's not even just that. Even in ring wise, like his Ring of Honor World Championship matches that he had, like some of the best matches he's had for 5-10 years. You know what I mean? He was still showing up and he was doing the biz, and like, you know, he's been crapped on as well online over the last like 2-3 years over his weight gain and stuff like that. And it's just like, yeah, but if you actually listen to his podcast like we do, he explains like the whole thing behind, you know, where he was taken really ill at one point and then had to change his whole diet and stuff up, and you know, and then he come back and he had that 6-pack probably for the first time in his career, and now he hasn't got a 6-pack again, he's got a bit of a gut again. Like the way people just body shame people online, especially wrestlers, and that is just it's shocking to me. But
yeah,
I also look at it the same way and think, well, if you look like that but you're still in WWE, would you all be crapping on it?
Exactly. That's what you need to think as well. And I was quite annoyed because me and my mate had booked Fozzy tickets to go and see him, not only when he was over here, and that's when he had the health scare. Obviously, at first, I didn't know the reason why it was cancelled.
Yeah.
And then why it was cancelled, I was like, oh God, hope he's okay. And then, like you said, when he came back all trimmed with a 6-pack, people then suddenly started liking Jericho again. Well, where were you a few months ago when he was quote unquote overweight or whatever?
Yeah.
But I'm not being funny. If I was like Jericho and overweight, as some people say, but still putting on the matches that he was having, and they weren't short matches, they were lengthy matches with people half his age, by like Dante Martin, Jungle Boy. He was still, you know, putting in the work and, you know, getting people over or whatever.
Well, that's it, isn't it? It shouldn't really be about what the guy looks like. I mean, it's like Keith Lee. You know, Keith Lee's decided he doesn't want to dye his hair anymore. Like he's dyed his hair for years. He's had grey hair for years. You know, he doesn't want to dye his hair anymore, so he's got grey hair. And then all of a sudden, everyone's like has an opinion on that. Like, why are you bothered? Why are you bothered? Like Keith Lee in the ring is still one of the best big men you'll ever see. Like the way he moves in the ring is phenomenal for the fella that is big.
Yeah, no, I agree. And another one you could say is Samoa Joe as well. People moan about Samoa Joe's weight, but he literally runs around, jumps around that ring like he's a cruiserweight. It's ridiculous. Someone of his size and Keith Lee to do the stuff that they do. That doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense to me logically, but they're doing it. So,
and it's nuts to think as well. These people were probably massive Big Show fans back in the day too.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, so like, I mean, I've been enjoying the stuff in AEW since he's come. I think the only thing that I haven't enjoyed, to be honest, because I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say everything smells roses and stuff, because you know, we're realist. But like, I really, really loved, obviously, the Inner Circle, like the way they debuted, and it really felt good, and it was, you know, it was well thought out. You know, it was good when they put Moxley over and stuff like that. But then, like the JAS, it sort of feels done now. You know what I mean? Like, I know it's enhancing Danny Garcia, and they've done really well with that. I mean, what are the other ones called? That Daddy Magic and Cool Hand.
Cool Hand. Yeah. Well, they were not seeing that. I don't know what they've been up to recently.
Yeah. So I mean, they're never really going to get over, are they? I mean, I think the main reason was mainly for Danny Garcia, and I agree, Garcia is fantastic, and I think he's going to have a phenomenal career. But yeah, it's sort of the faction in that now, and I know they're going to go into this thing with Sammy Guevara, who, by the way, wasn't in the original JS. They added him in later because he couldn't get over on his own. So they had to put him back with Jericho. But it all sort of feels a little bit stale and a little bit overly played out right now. So I'm not sure what's next and what the end game is for the JAS in AEW.
Yeah, it's quite interesting you brought that up as well. And kind of like you said, like even being big Jericho fans that we are, it's good to admit that everything is not perfect and everything's not always great.
Yeah,
But I agree that it has kind of run its course a little bit. I'm intrigued to see where it goes next, but I don't want it to keep dragging on, like just for them to be together for the sake of it or whatever. Like
yeah,
Sammy's got himself over again now, but now he's is he back in the group or whatever? Now we've got the element of Sting kind of having a little bit with Jericho as well. Like
yeah.
that could build to something pretty decent. But I don't want them to just keep doing the JAS just for the sake of it or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, like, I am intrigued. Like, I mean, for the last, I'd say the last few weeks, maybe a couple of months, it has been a bit sort of played out. And that I think the first time it's re-piqued my interest is with this whole Sammy situation now, especially when they called each other out, and it was like, Jericho said to Sammy, well, why didn't you ask me to help you? And you'd be AEW World Champ right now. And he was like, yeah, well, you've never asked me to help you with Adam Cole. So it was like, right, okay, yeah, that's fair game. Yeah. And it's like, okay, that's fair game. And then obviously they teamed again, didn't he, this week with Suzuki, which was brilliant, by the way, when Suzuki done the pose on top of Jericho.
Very good.
I popped so hard for that. I'm a massive Minoru Suzuki fan, and I just thought it was superb. But yeah, I mean, it is a bit played out. I mean, hopefully, Sammy and I go off and continue to be a face because, like you said, he is over right now. Danny Garcia, he's at a level where he can now move away from Jericho as well. So, although it has gone a bit stale and it's got a bit boring for fans to watch and stuff, like it's done the job it was supposed to do. So even if there is a bit of a negative, it was supposed to get Danny Garcia over, which it has done, and it's supposed to have obviously repushed Sammy Guevara because it didn't work the first time he went on his own. Because it was then when all that crap with his ex, and then the overlap with Ty Conti come about, so it sort of put him back down in fans' estimation, didn't it?
Yeah, and it's very rare that we're in the year 2023 and we can have first in wrestling, and like last week was the first meeting in a ring on TV of Jericho and Sting. Like the first, that's baffling to me that they've both been wrestling that long, and that's the first time they've been on facing each other in a ring, and obviously with the bats and everything. That to me just looks so awesome and so cool.
Yeah, it's absolutely unbelievable to think as well that like we were both in WCW for a good few years at the same time, and the paths just didn't cross.
That
what I
also
mean?
makes me think of that Jericho and Undertaker never had a feud as such. They had the odd match here and there, but they never had a solid feud, and it always baffled me why they never cross paths as much. And Jericho's brought it up a few times as well. Like he's wondering why those two never had a good old. They could have had such a good feud together.
Oh man, like the storytelling alone would be phenomenal. You know what I mean? Especially with, like you say, how good Jericho is on a mic. And the Undertaker with all of his different gimmicks. I mean, like Jericho could literally create a whole new gimmick just to feud with the Undertaker.
Yeah, that would have been so cool. And obviously, if it was around when Paul Bearer was alive, that would have played into it as well. But if not, just those two against each other, just you wouldn't even need to talk. You could set up a match kind of like when Taker and Triple H set up their match. You don't need to talk or whatever. But obviously with Jericho, you do want him to talk. But literally just those two in the ring together, and that's why I'm glad that I know Sting isn't Taker, but that's why I'm glad they're doing like it with Sting, because obviously Sting was always referred to as like the WCW version of Taker. So it's good that they're kind of doing something along those lines, really.
Yeah, and I love it as well. It was only a few weeks ago that it was brought up in an interview to Chris Jericho, and it was like, we've seen rumors that AEW are looking to do something between Sting and Chris Jericho, and Jericho's like, I've got no interest in working with Sting. Why would I? He's an old dude. I've stayed in AEW basically to put over the young talent. And it seemed like a genuine interview where he was like, do you know what? Like, there's no interest, and it was believable and everything else. And then like 2 weeks later, there they are with bats at each other's throats, and it's like, hang on a minute, what happened there?
That just shows how good Jericho is. Like he convinced you, he convinced me, and I was like, oh, okay, maybe we're not going to see this. And then, like you said, 1 or 2 weeks later, okay, Jericho was fibbing yet again.
Yeah. So, but I know you're a fan of Fozzy as well, aren't you? Yeah.
Yeah, I love Fozzy. Yeah, I've met Fozzy A couple of times. I've been to see him probably about 5 or 6 times now, and I've paid to be a VIP a few times. Met the band backstage. I remember the first time I met Jericho. There was 3 of us who were VIPs, and there was 2 girls and me. And he came up to me and goes, "Oh, you must be Scott." And obviously he worked it out because obviously there was 2 girls there. But I just went, "Oh my god, one of my biggest heroes knows my name. It's ridiculous."
Yeah. Well, that's cool. I mean, I've seen him in concert the once. I managed to get to see them. The one time a friend had 2 tickets about 2 years ago. Ben. He was supposed to go with his missus, and then for whatever reason, I think she was working or something. He said to me, "Do you want to go?" I was like, "Hell yeah, of course I do." We went to see them live. It was about 2 years ago now, and it's absolutely phenomenal. And especially when they sang Judas, the roof just blew off. It was so good.
I've not been to them since Judas has been, since they've been doing Judas. So that's why I was hoping, like a few years ago, that's what they're going to do. But yeah, next time he's in the UK, I'm going to do my best to go and see him again, and obviously see Judas live. But yeah, he was literally so good, man. It's unbelievable. And people criticize like, "Oh, he's not that great a singer," which, to be honest, no, he's not. But he's a performer, and he puts his all into it. Like anything he does, even when he was on Dancing with the Stars, he wasn't the best dancer, but he was Jericho dancing. So that's all you need to know, really.
Well, that's it. And he done the Masked Singer as well, didn't he? And because like his voice is like, it's a certain thing, isn't it? Like if you hear Chris Jericho talking, you know it's Chris Jericho. If you hear him singing, you know it's a distinctive voice. And he changed his voice, and you would sort of go, "Is it? Is it not?
Yeah.
Is it?" And you're like, "No, why is Chris Jericho?" I think he might have even been Ring of Honor world champ at the time.
I think he might have been. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like, why would he be on that? And then all of a sudden takes the mask off, and my missus was like, "You seen him live? He sounds awful." And I was like, "No, that's not generally how he sounds live."
I remember he said that they asked him to go on for the first series of The Masked Singer, and he went, "Nah, this is going to be some rubbish gimmick. Probably get cancelled after the first season." And then obviously when he got asked again, I don't know what series it was, 5 or 6. He's like, "Yeah, I'll do it now." But yeah, but he was like I said, he was distorting his voice a little bit. But there was, bits on there. You think, is that Jericho? No, is it? And then even when he unmasked, I was like, "Yeah, that is Jericho." It took me a while to actually acknowledge it was him. Yeah.
Yeah, it's mad, isn't it? Have you got a favourite Fozzy song? Could you pinpoint one?
It's got, even though I haven't seen it live, it's got to be Judas. Like literally, the way he gets the crowd to sing that. And I remember one video that I always go back to is his first, or it might have been the second Jericho cruise that he did. He was AEW world champion, came out, the fans were singing his song, and he was on his cruise, and it's literally, he was like living the dream, like literally. Yeah, so Judas for me, man. I know it's a cliched answer to probably say nowadays, but yeah, Judas is just such a banging song.
Yeah, it's so well, and it's one of them recognizable songs now, isn't it? It's like when you hear "Break the Walls," it's Chris Jericho. Yeah. And Judas is now the same. He started first using it in New Japan. Obviously he didn't have to get the rights for it because he'd done it himself, which is pretty cool. And like obviously in New Japan it was like, wow, yeah, this is new. This is quite cool. He's coming out through his own music. And then it wasn't obviously until they got to AEW that Judas become massive. And then, I think it was Sammy Guevara who originally started getting the fans to sing along with the song.
Talking about dodgy singing, Sammy Guevara, when he was trying to sing Judas, people moan about Jericho. No, Sammy's even worse.
That was terrible, wasn't it? Oh, I remember it.
Do you think, obviously, when Jericho was a heel like he is now, do you think it was a good idea that they kept his Judas, or do you think they should have changed the song? For me, I'm glad they kept his Judas, to be fair, but I can see some people saying, "Oh, they should have changed it to something else," or.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, like with a Chris Jericho, because he can switch and change from a face to a heel depending on who he's against, I think he'll be forever switching and changing the music.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. Yeah,
you know what I mean.
Every other show, yeah.
Yeah. I also think that because in WWE, they had the last version he had of Break the Walls that lasted for a good 7-8 years. It didn't matter whether he was face or heel. It was one of them themes, wasn't it? And I think there is certain wrestlers that probably do need the theme change when they are a face and heel, if they're not that good at being distinctive between the two. But I did listen to the pod. I can't remember which episode it was, but there was an episode on the Talks Jericho podcast where he did talk about it, and he said, you know, he had a bit of music that he was going to use when he went to heel, and Tony Khan was like, no, this is, everyone knows when you hear this, it's you that's coming out. And he said, yeah, but everyone sings to it, and he's like, yes, so let them sing, and then it's up to you to get them to boo you. And I
Yeah.
thought, you know, that's clever. It's a good challenge, and it is clever. I mean, everyone's singing the song and everyone else, and he's like, "Oh yeah, 2 seconds on the microphone." Everyone's like, "Boo, you suck." I thought, you know, that's perfect, isn't it, for a person like Jericho to have a challenge like that every time? It's fantastic.
There was even a few shows when he came out with no music, but the fans were still singing it, it away. So yeah, that just shows how over that is, and obviously how over he still is in the year 2023 or whatever.
Yeah, that was with MJF, wasn't it? It was the whole, what was it, the 7 Labors of Jericho or whatever it was. And yeah, he couldn't have music and the fans sang it all the way through instead. Yeah, but like say though, it's one of them songs. Like, I mean, like I did say, like some people do need music change, but I think when you're a massive star, you need to keep the same music. Like the glass shatters, it's Stone Cold. You know what I mean? You know, time to play the game. It's Triple H. You know, Shawn Michaels was a sexy boy, whether he was face or whether he was heel. You know, it made no difference. That was a song, and
he's still a sexy boy, 53 or 54 now. Bless him.
yeah. Well, that's it, isn't it? I mean, yeah. So I'll probably say at first I was shocked that they didn't change it, and then when I heard the reasoning, I then understood it more. And now when I see, because now I've heard him say, you know, Tony's basically put a challenge on them to make them boom. And I'll look out for that, which I think's fun as well.
Yeah, and I remember it's quite interesting that you brought up about him saying about the song on the podcast as well. I remember him talking about when he first turned heel as well, when he was going back to when he was wearing the suit. And merchandise were talking about what T-shirts he wants, and he's like, I don't want people wearing my T-shirts. You know, I don't want anyone to be supporting me. I don't want to go out there and see a new Jericho T-shirt. I don't want any merchandise for me while I'm in this character, which again is perfect.
Yeah, it's like the old style heels, isn't it? That's what he was taking from, like the likes of like a Roddy Piper. You know, there wouldn't be like thousands of fans wearing Roddy Piper T-shirts. They'd all be wearing Hulk Hogan T-shirts. You know what I mean? Because back then he was the top bad guy. He was the top good guy. So yeah, it makes sense, doesn't it? Why would you want your fans wearing the T-shirts? But I mean, it's merchandise sales, isn't it? But I suppose in AEW it's different anyway, because they earn more money from T-shirt sales than what they did when they were in WWE, just based on contracts. So I understand now why they push out 15 T-shirts per wrestler per year.
God, I was about to say, there was when he had obviously the little bit of the bubbly T-shirt, then he had the I've got a ticket T-shirt like 2 or 3 weeks later. Literally in AEW, he's had so many different T-shirts. It's unreal.
Yeah, that's it. And you know what? It's like his figures as well. I mean, Chris Jericho's probably got the most AEW wrestling figures. I think he might have had one every series. If not, there's only probably been one series that he hasn't had one. I know that you collect the Chris Jericho figures as well. But I haven't managed to get hold of the Chris Jericho full Painmaker outfit one yet, with the hat, the spikes, the paint. That's the one that I'm looking for next. I'm sure, was it you that put it up on the group not too long ago?
Yeah. Some of them on eBay are ridiculous prices, and I went into Smith's a few weeks ago, and there's a few more in there. Well, they were online, but when I went to the shop, they sold out. Yeah, but at the moment, I know you collect like any ones or whatever, but for me, it's just Jericho at the moment. I've only got 3, which are on my wall over there. But yeah, I'm trying to get as many as I can. But yeah, some of them are so expensive on eBay. It's unreal.
It's ridiculous, isn't it? And like I say, considering like a Chris Jericho, who's probably had about 5 different AEW figures as well, like the price of the AEW figures when it's as a resale, just shocking.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Talking about how do you feel about the film roles that Jericho? Obviously, me and you are big film fans as well. Obviously, he was in Sharknado 3. He was in Terrifier 2. He's been in MacGruber. Obviously, let's be honest, he's not the best actor, but it's just good to see him like branching out, and like he does his singing, he does his dancing, he does his, he does the few acting roles here as well.
Yeah,
it's nice to see him pop up in other entertainment as well. To be fair,
see, like this is my Chris Jericho confession. I have never seen a Chris Jericho movie.
Have you not? Oh man, you
No.
need to watch MacGruber. It's got him, Kane, Big Show, Great Khali. So good, so good. And in Terrifier 2, he's only got a very small role. It's a horror film, but he's pretty good in that. And Sharknado 3, again, small role, but yeah, he's pretty decent in that as well.
Yeah. I remember watching a trailer for MacGruber, and I remember like back in the day when you used to have to download everything through like LimeWire and give your computer like an STD.
Gotcha.
I remember I did actually download it and I burnt it onto disc, but I mean, I used to spend more time probably downloading and burning movies than I actually did watching them. So it ended up obviously in a pile of films that I just never got around to watching. But
By the time you downloaded, you're like, oh, I'm not in the mood to watch that now.
yeah. It'd take like 4 days to download a movie. And it's like, oh yeah, I don't want to watch that. But yeah, no, so that is one thing I will admit. I've not actually ever seen a Chris Jericho movie.
And he's been talking about, because I know you're into your comics as well. He wants to bring out, or it might be in the process of doing it. The Painmaker. He wants to bring him out into a more character. So there's a comic book line he's got on the way coming, which I'm sure you might buy, obviously being a Jericho comic book fan and all that stuff.
Definitely, I've got my eye on that for when that comes out. Yeah. I mean, the Painmaker character for me, when I first seen it, I'll be honest, I didn't really take to it straight away. He debuted it in New Japan. It was after he'd had his first match with Kenny Omega, which was obviously the big, massive head turner for everyone. Like, you know, whether you watched New Japan or not at the time, obviously it was well before AEW. You know, it was like, why is this? Because no one knew that his contract was up with WWE. It was not a well-known thing. He was just doing live shows at the time, and he'd done the Greatest Royal Rumble as well. It was the last pay-per-view he did. And then all of a sudden, he just appeared because they had a little back and forth on Twitter, Kenny Omega and Jericho. But you see that all the time between wrestlers and different companies. It's just like, oh yeah, they got a bit of beef. You know, they're all shitting on each other's companies and stuff. And then he appeared on the screen. I think it was Dominion. He just appeared on the screen. It was like, oh my God, why is, and everyone was saying it, why is WWE's Chris Jericho? Because no one knew his contract was gone. You know, again, that's another massive thing that he did. But then he went against Kazuchika Okada for the IWGP World Heavyweight Championship. And obviously, he came up with the Painmaker gimmick, basically because Okada was called the Rainmaker. So obviously, coming against Kenny Omega, it was Alpha versus Omega, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And then he goes on to Okada, so it's the Rainmaker versus the Painmaker. And when I first seen it, it wasn't as over the top as it ended up becoming. It was like a little bit of a hat, a little bit of eyeshadow, a little bit of lipstick with that random flicker halfway up his cheek, and I think maybe a very limited jacket to what it then later become. But I was sort of like, oh, what are you doing? Why have you got to like create a whole new gimmick for each person you're facing? And then obviously he ran with it. Then he ended up going into the feud with Naito and winning the IWGP Intercontinental Championship, which I thought was great. And then he started proper getting into it, and he realised there's something in it. He got into it, and then by the time AEW had come around, he'd perfected it. You know, he had it down to a T, exactly what he wanted to do with that gimmick. Were you a fan of the Painmaker gimmick?
Yeah, I mean, kind of like I've said to you before, I'm not that clued up on New Japan Pro Wrestling as a whole. I've seen all of Jericho's matches, but I was actually about to ask you, did he have like 5 matches there? I can't even remember what ones he won and what ones he didn't, which I know as a Jericho fan is not great to say, but
yeah, I'm trying to remember now. He had the one against Omega, which he lost at Wrestle Kingdom for the US title. He then lost against Okada as well for the world title. He beat Naito for the Intercontinental Championship. I think he defended it once, possibly twice, and then dropped it back to Naito again. That was the last one he had in New Japan.
Well, I remember it being like 5 or 6. I watched them when they first aired or happened, but I haven't seen him since. But I just remember him kind of like you said, when everyone was surprised, because he always said, I'll never work in another company than WWE, and I'll never work for anyone other than Vince. And then obviously he showed up there. So yeah, again, Jericho with the Pinocchio and the fibs. But it's good that he quote unquote plays us fans, because we don't want everything to be revealed to us. We want surprises.
Yeah, and it's hard in the day and age with the internet to surprise and shock people. Like say they had a bit of back and forth on Twitter, which obviously built the start of the story with Kenny Omega, and it got fans excited, going, "Oh, could you imagine if they ever did face?" And obviously they're both being with the Winnipeg background and stuff. You know, it was a big thing, but it was like one of them dream matches. You know, like a Sting Taker. Like, oh yeah, it's never actually going to come about that they're going to be in the same company at the same time. And then I think it was then people were starting to think Kenny Omega's going to WWE because I think he had about a year left on his contract. So people saying, "Oh, we might get it then." No one was actually going to think Jericho's just going to show up at the end of a match on the title and challenge Kenny Omega to a match. Again, it probably broke the internet as well because it was that wild at the time.
Yeah, and that was when, like you mentioned, people thought Kenny was going to come to WWE. That was when Cena was sharing images on his Instagram. I remember him sharing one of Kenny, and I was like, "Oh, okay, maybe something is happening." And obviously that didn't happen. So yeah, but like you said, you never thought those two were going to clash. But yeah, when they did, man, so good.
Yeah, and then obviously then they done the match in AEW at the beginning of AEW startup when they done Jericho versus Omega, and then obviously we got the debut with John Moxley in that match as well, right at the end of me.
Yeah. I also want to mention as well when obviously the pandemic was going on in AEW and Jericho was on commentary for quite a lot. Him on commentary was just so good. Like he has a different mind for like he was making jokes and stuff or whatever, but it's not like the WWE commentary when it was just jokes that aren't related to the match. He was making jokes, but he was talking about the match at the same time as well. Him on commentary was just class. It was unreal.
Yeah. I mean, he still does the odd Rampage now, doesn't he?
Yeah.
And you know what? I like the way like he'll comment on the match, like you say, and he'll make a bit of a joke and stuff. But he also knows all the right names for the holds and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
then when it's someone on there that he's either having a feud with or he's teaming with, he's like purely in character for like just that one match. It's brilliant. He's like, "You little bastard." And it's like, "Whoa, hang on a minute." But yeah, no, I mean, like I say, Jericho for me is someone that I'll always keep an eye on, no matter what company he goes to. Um, you know, he wasn't really a big deal in WCW. They didn't know what to do with him when it comes to WWE. You know, made a name for himself quite quick. He went stale for a little bit after his debut, but he found his way again, thank God. You know, and then obviously, like I say, when he then went and done the stuff with New Japan, you know, it put New Japan on the map again because people had sort of gone away from it for a bit. You know, loads of people had never even looked at New Japan, started to tune in and watch New Japan.
Exactly. Yeah. I would. I'll openly admit I've seen the odd match before, but until Jericho had gone there, I would never even have thought of looking at that. Which I know is not. There's some of the best pure wrestling I know is over there. But for me, I grew up on WCW, WWE, entertainment wrestling or whatever. So I wouldn't have even thought to look there as such, which I know is not a nice thing to say or whatever, because there's so many talented people who are just there. But Jericho made me start watching that, and even to this day, I need to get into it a bit more. But yeah, if Jericho hadn't have gone there, I wouldn't have even watched any of the matches. To be fair.
Yeah, and it's the same with a lot of people are the same. Like I think they ended up turning around, and I think the New Japan the New Japan World, which is what they have instead of like a WWE network, their monthly subscription, I think it increased by something like 60% before that Wrestle Kingdom. It went up massively just because there was a mega star on there, and like I say, because they didn't even come out either before the match and actually let us know whether or not he actually was still signed with WWE at the time. So it was, and it was good the way they did it because it was sort of a play on, why is this WWE guy just turned up? And is he just going to be in New Japan now, or is he going to go back to WWE afterwards? You know, and it was the whole play on it. So everyone was like say, people that just wanted to watch Chris Jericho were all signing up to New Japan World. Go, oh, hang on, is anyone else going to turn up? And I suppose it goes back to like the days of when you've got like a Scott Hall and a Kevin Nash just rocking up on WCW.
Yeah, and to a lesser extent, when Jericho came back to do the Stone Cold podcast while he was still on the contract, I know that's obviously a lesser extent, but when I saw the promo for that, I was like, oh my God, what's going on here? Is he coming back to WWE? But obviously that's just a one-off podcast, but they were openly talking about AEW, so it's just good to hear other companies allowing, because it's a very narrow mind for WWE to try and make the fans believe that that's the only company.
Yeah.
But there are other companies, and watching that podcast, kind of like we're having, it was just a chat between mates, and they were talking about AEW, they were talking about WCW, WWE. Nothing was off limits, which was really, really cool to see.
Yeah, that's the type of podcast that I really enjoy. Because like I say, I was a massive fan of E&C, Edge Christian when they done theirs. I've been really listening to Renee's. I know she's took like a couple of months off at the moment, but like just the differences of different wrestlers that they get on and stuff like that. Like I don't want to listen to the same people all the time. I like it when they mix it around and stuff and bring different people on. And I think since Chris Jericho especially has been going, obviously, to do New Japan, to do AEW, when he does have wrestling guests on there now, there's so many more different varieties, because he still gets WWE guys, because obviously he's still got contacts, he's still got friends there. You know, and then he's got people from AEW, people from New Japan, and then he starts doing like ones with people from like indies and stuff that people aren't maybe too familiar with. And it's like having such a massive podcast like Chris Jericho's that is now, like having that cover, like say a Nick Wayne, who people don't really know who he is, but Chris Jericho's having an interview with him, people then go out and look and go, "Ooh, who's this 17-year-old kid, Nick Wayne? Apparently he's just signed with AEW, but he can't wrestle until he's 18 on TV." So people go away then and look at his matches and stuff just because Chris Jericho's talked about him.
Yeah, and talking about his podcast as well, the one that was on Friday was about Jack the Ripper. So he literally gets guests from, like, he's had Eli Roth on there before, the director. He's had the director of Terrifier 2, like I mentioned, when he was in that film. But literally, yeah, and the podcast, like you mentioned as well, when he has indie wrestlers that you wouldn't, I don't know about you, but I wouldn't know too much about them if I hadn't listened to that Jericho podcast or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, over the last few years, I have ventured out a lot more than what I used to watch in regards to wrestling and that. But it's also what's available to you as well. You know, because a lot of it is paid stuff, like, you know, fight TV and stuff like that. So I mean, are you going to pay like £15 to £20 out on, say, Warrior Wrestling pay-per-view because one wrestler's on there? Probably not. So you probably won't see all these indie guys that are doing some really good stuff. Then if they go on to like a Chris Jericho podcast or like a Renee Paquette podcast and they toast them, then you'll go, hang on a minute. And you can just type the name into YouTube and there will be matches them out there. But you know what I mean? Because you didn't know that they were a thing, you're not going to go out your way, you know, because you don't know who they are. So like Chris Jericho's is a massive podcast now. It's probably the biggest in wrestling at the moment.
Yeah, I'd agree. And I don't think he's been on the podcast, but obviously when he had the match with Action Andretti and he beat Jericho, that put him on the map big style. And I was not even, well, I didn't know who he was beforehand, but I've gone look on YouTube and watched some of his older matches or whatever. So yeah, whether it's on his podcast or whether he does them through another avenue, he brings eyes to so many different people.
Yeah. So many different people, so many different companies. The one thing I will say with Action Andretti, to be fair, is like hasn't really done anything since beating Chris Jericho.
No, I felt exactly the same, which was a shame, really, because he had that much momentum after beating Jericho. And yeah, they've like literally kind of worded it better. They've done nothing with him since, really, which is a real shame. That just makes that match and the win over Jericho a bit pointless now, looking back.
Yeah. Like I think they had like a 6-man tag match. Action Andretti was part of the 6-man tag match when it was Suzuki, Sammy, and Jericho, I think, wasn't he, this week?
Yes, yeah.
And they just threw it out there like it was passing comments. Oh yeah, Action Andretti's got to win over Chris Jericho. And it's like, right, okay, but you've done nothing with it. It was similar to like what they did years ago when it was Shelton Benjamin and he got like 3 consecutive wins over Triple H on Raws, and it just went nowhere, absolutely nowhere. I think they might have had a world title match and Triple H won in the end. That might have been the payoff. I can't remember. I just remember he had like 3 consecutive wins after he'd been drafted to Raw against Triple H, who was the world champion at the time, and then like it just didn't really do nothing with him. I hope, like, I don't rate Action Andretti in the same as like I'd rate like a Darby Allin or a Jungle Boy. But I mean, there's no reason at the time. I think Sammy Guevara was the TNT champion at the time, if I'm correct. There's no reason why he couldn't have had like he beats Chris Jericho, so then Sammy's like, right, I'll take my revenge on you because you've beaten, you know, he's our faction leader. even put my belt on the line and lose the belt to him. Then we could have had him even a couple of weeks. He could have been like a TNT champion or something. But then that'd solidify a reason to why Jericho then loses to such a newcomer.
Yeah, and I know even though it was a few months after the win, they could have even had Action Andretti challenge Jericho for the Ring of Honor title as well.
Yeah.
They didn't even do anything like what you suggested with the TNT title. They literally did nothing with it. Maybe for a week or so afterwards, they were talking about it, bigging it up. But yeah, like you said, it was just a throwaway comment on the match this week.
Yeah. So I mean, it is a big thing. You know, he's got to win over Chris Jericho, and like I say, because he'd been Ring of Honor World Champion as well. He did he defended something like 10, 11 times maybe.
Yeah.
You know, so he barely lost this year at the beginning of the year before obviously Action and Andretti come along. So it was actually a big deal, but then it just didn't do too much with him.
Yeah, which is a real shame actually, because beating Jericho is massive, like really, really big. And yeah, it baffles me that they, like, whether that's TK, Tony Khan's decision or whatever, I can't see that being Jericho's decision, because Jericho is all about giving back to the business and giving back to the young guns or whatever. But yeah, that just baffled me that literally went nowhere.
It was his idea, wasn't it, to put him over, because he said he would do that. But it also reminds me, actually, going back to Chris Jericho in WWE, when he put Fandango over, was it WrestleMania?
Yes, yeah.
And he did nothing with Fandango.
I was watching a What Culture video the other day. They did the top 10 weird ways that matches were built, because I remember that was built because Jericho kept saying his name wrong. And looking back, he kept, I can't remember what he said, but yeah, he couldn't say Fandango, but he kept saying it wrong. But yeah, that match, and that when he lost at WrestleMania, actually, one of the Fozzy shows was after that event, and I asked him, I went, did you not feel to like do a cheeky roll up and win the match? He's like, what are you, a stupid idiot? I did what my boss told me to do. And I was like, okay. But that is like classic Jericho, and he called me a stupid idiot, so I was made for that day.
Another thing I'll actually say about Chris Jericho, I said that obviously I've not seen a Chris Jericho movie. I've not actually seen him wrestle live. We went to WWE SmackDown a long time ago, and it was around the time of when they had the Authority, and I think Dean Ambrose was the WWE champion at the time on SmackDown. He was in a feud with Bray Wyatt and stuff. So we went and seen over in Liverpool when they come over. We seen a SmackDown, me and the wife. And Chris Jericho was there. As we've seen him live, he come out. He done the highlight reel. So he had Stephanie and Triple H on it, and it was some great banter and back and forth and stuff, you know, and got to see him live that way, not just as part of Fozzy, but seeing him actually in wrestling. But actually, he didn't have a match. It was just the highlight reel, which was unfortunate, and I haven't actually seen him wrestle live.
Yeah, I'm trying to think as well. Now you said that, I don't think I've seen him wrestle live either. I've seen him come out. I can't remember. I think it might have been at the O2. I can't remember what it was for. It's for a promo, but yeah, I've never seen him wrestle live either. Which is a shame really. I want to so bad, and obviously if he doesn't come back to WWE, it's obviously going to be AEW for me now. But yeah, I don't think I have seen him live, which is a bit of a shame. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've met him. Luckily enough, I've got a photograph of him. Met him at Liverpool Comic Con for the Love of Wrestling a few years back, and I actually nearly bottled going. I've met so many celebrities through the likes of Comic Con, and some big names as well, like Lou Ferrigno and people like that, some massive names. And then, like, when my wife bought me the ticket, and I was going for the sole purpose to meet Chris Jericho, I had a couple of other photographs booked because I thought I fill out my day, and there is some other wrestlers I wanted to meet, but Jericho was obviously the number one, and it was just after AEW had started, and I was sitting there, and because for whatever reason it was only me that could end up going instead of the family, because we normally go as a family, and I was actually sitting there on the bus going, I don't know if I can actually go and meet him. And I actually questioned it. There's only been twice that I've actually bottled. Sorry, not bottled. I've actually gone to like question whether or not I should still go through with it, just because they mean that much to me, and I sort of just, you know, you sort of get overwhelmed occasionally and stuff like by these celebrities and these people that you've been watching for so long. Like, I mean, I think in the end I ended up telling them, I was like, I've been a fan of yours for like 18 years, and just like, couple hours, and I was like, oh my God, why did I say that? But he was like, do you know what? Thank you so much for being a fan, and I hope you continue to be a fan. And just a couple of seconds chat after the photograph, like, but I just had to actually speak to him and not just turn up, get a picture, and go, and then move on.
I was exactly the same. Like when I met Jericho the first time, I paid £150 to be VIP, which looking back is quite a lot. But so I was questioning, should I have paid £150 to meet him? And I was questioning, kind of like you said, oh, is this going to take me when I see him on TV now? Am I going to think, oh, I've seen this guy now, I know the tricks of the trade or whatever? And I remember we went to Nando's and also Queen of Iceni, which is a Wetherspoons down this way. And I sat one chair away from him, and he's like, "What are you doing? Come and sit next to me." And I was like, "Oh my god, oh my god!" And I was just literally at first, I was like asking him really boring questions, like, "Oh, so how did you start into wrestling?" You know, blah blah blah. And once we started talking or whatever, it was literally like I was just sitting there with Chris Jericho, just having a normal chat. He was asking me about my job, my life, and everything. It was so cool. It was unreal.
So is that part of the actual VIP experience? Was like a sit and meet and greet?
Yeah, you got to see them do some sound tests to start off with. So you got to see or hear them, you know, testing out the drums and obviously testing out his voice, all that stuff. We got a Q&A session. First time I met him, there was only 3 of us with a VIP. The second time, I think there was about 6 or 7. So it was quite personal both times. You got to have food with him. I will just say he's a very messy eater. He kept spilling sweet corn in Nando's. So if you meet Jericho, don't go to anywhere that has sweet corn with him. He's literally spilling it all over the place. And also when the main set was going on, we were right next to the stage. So we had like the prime view and everything. So yeah, it was £150, which is quite a lot. But yeah, and I also got like some signed merch. Obviously, got him to sign my arm. We got a signed Fozzy T-shirt from all the band. But it wasn't him. Like the whole band were like amazing. Like Rich Ward, the guitarist, like all of them were like down to earth. And they even went to me. You're only here because of Chris, aren't you? And I said no at first, but they knew I was a wrestling fan, so they went, yeah, you are. So we'll just let you and Chris talk. It's fine.
Yeah. You actually got your signature tattooed on your arm, didn't you?
Yeah. Met him, and don't know if you can see that 2010, which is obviously the year there. And also, I don't know if I've mentioned this before. I think I have. So he's actually blocked me on Twitter.
Yeah.
And I was trying to pinpoint when it was or why it happened, and I was thinking about it last night as well, randomly. There was a Hall of Fame ceremony. I think the Bushwhackers might have been being inducted or some tag team, and the Hall of Fame crowd were booing. And Jericho sent a tweet out late one night. It was a Saturday, I believe it was. I remember it quite vividly because I'm still quite sad about it. But he tweeted going, "Oh, this is disrespectful. You shouldn't be booing the fans." And I can't remember exactly, but I tweeted back saying something, "Oh, you know, us fans can boo and cheer for who we want, blah 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 blah." And I woke up the next day and I thought, oh, Jericho's not tweeted, stupidly thinking, oh, Jericho's not tweeted me back. I better check in case he said something about me but not added me. And I went onto his profile and, oh, no, he's blocked me. And then when I met him the second time, I asked him to unblock me, but obviously he didn't.
Wouldn't you just make another Twitter account?
All my friends have said that, but yeah, actually, yeah, I might do that, actually, yeah. Yeah, that's not a bad shout, actually.
Yeah. I was just thinking, like, the first thing I'd do if Jericho blocked me on Twitter, just make another account.
So I'm blocked by CM Punk as well, which, yeah, so I'm blocked by 2 of my favourites. So yeah, I might actually have to set up a new one, to be fair.
To be honest, like half of Twitter's probably blocked by CM Punk. So
Nothing special, is it? So
so just gonna round it up now. Do you have a favourite gimmick of Chris Jericho's and a favourite match of Chris Jericho's?
Oh God, how long have you got? For me to think. Favorite gimmick probably would be. I'm not quite sure what the name of the gimmick was, but the one we were talking about when he was wearing the suit and obviously the slow words and everything. That and the list of Jericho, those 2 gimmicks couldn't be more different. But that just shows what a great performer he is. Yeah. The match I was most disappointed with. I know that's not what you asked, but the match him and KO had at WrestleMania, not the match itself, but the positioning on the card, that disappointed me. So I wanted more from that match. But favourite match, probably probably the Shawn Michaels ladder match we were talking about at the start. They just had so good chemistry, and there was it WrestleMania 19 they had a match as well?
Yeah, WrestleMania 19 they faced for the first time, didn't they? And it was the whole build up of Jericho being like, oh, you know, you are my hero, and everything. It was even the one where Shawn Michaels come up with confetti cannons and only 2 out of 4 went.
And they had to hug at the end, and then that did Jericho low blow him, didn't he, at the end of the match?
Kicked him in the nuts.
So him and Shawn Michaels just had such good chemistry, and obviously Jericho growing up, kind of like what we mentioned about meeting Jericho. Imagine how Jericho growing up being a Shawn Michaels fan, and now he's wrestling one of his heroes. Like, that's so good, and you could see like just how those two were together. It was just amazing. So yeah, for me, any match he had with Shawn Michaels is probably up there for me.
Yeah, definitely. But I'll probably say the same as you with the gimmick. The 2008 heel Chris Jericho is perfect Chris Jericho for me. And it's like when people go back and they say when you talk about like say Randy Orton, everyone says like 2009 Randy Orton was perfect. So for me, like 2008 Chris Jericho is perfect. You know, there is like years that you can pinpoint with some people. But again, like the ladder match, like in WWE, like if I go and watch Chris Jericho match from his time in WA, it probably will be the ladder match with Shawn Michaels, and again the build up where he knocks his missus out in the highlight reel and everything else that they done with that was brilliant. But outside of WA, I'll probably go with the match with Kenny Omega. I mean, the match itself was brilliant. The build up was superb. And again, it put so many eyes on so much different product, and obviously was one of the main reasons we now have AEW, was because of that whole build and story and match. But yeah, I'll probably say in WE 2008 ladder match, and then outside WE is the Wrestle Kingdom match against Kenny Omega.
What did you think of, because we've not brought this up actually, what did you think of the match he had at WrestleMania 25 against the Three Legends? And obviously Mickey Rourke was there obviously at the end.
Hated it.
Did you? Oh.
Yeah, I didn't like it. For me, like, I just didn't see the point in it. I didn't see the need in it. I didn't really like the build up. I think the only thing that's been good that come out of that for me is the picture that now surfaces of Jericho punching Mickey Rourke in the face that says Chris Jericho in 2000 and whatever, 2010 was it, punching 2023 Chris Jericho in the face, because it does actually look like today's Jericho.
I did like the so I kind of agree with you. Like, Roddy Piper couldn't do much in that match, and nor could Superfly. But I did like the follow-up matches he had at the next couple of pay-per-views with Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. Their one-on-one matches, I thought they were proper quality coming off that from the next 2 pay-per-views or so.
Yeah, I mean, they were decent enough. It's just, again, it's another one of them that just didn't really need to happen. And I know you can say that with a lot of legends returning the matches and stuff that they do have. But you've got, when you do it, you've got to do it right. Like what AEW is doing with Sting currently. You know what I mean? He's having the right type of matches, the right style of matches and stuff like that. And Chris Jericho easily carried the Three Legends to a mediocre match. You know what I mean? He got out of them the best of what they could offer at that time. I just didn't see the need for it, and I think like Chris Jericho at the time as well deserved better. I know he wanted to do it, but sometimes what they want to do and what they should be doing obviously aren't the same thing. So yeah, that is probably, for me, Chris Jericho's worst WrestleMania match.
Yeah, to be fair, it's quite a good, interesting way of looking at it, because exactly what you said. Sometimes the things that people want, wrestlers or anything or whatever, isn't always the right or best thing to do. So yeah, I've not really looked at it at that viewpoint, to be fair, but like I like it, but. Yeah. But for me to just say I like a Chris Jericho match isn't really enough. I need to be a bit more.
Yeah. It's sort of like with Bret Hart in 2010, when he'd come back out of retirement and beat the Miz for the US title. Like, at the time, people were like, "Oh my God, Bret Hart's returned," and it's just won the US title and blah blah blah. But like, looking back on it, it's absolute trash. Like, why did that happen?
Yeah.
It never needed to happen. But and as a wrestling figure fan, I know they've brought out, I think, 2 wrestling figures of Bret Hart's 2010 run, and I won't be getting either one of them.
Do they come with about 100 chairs? Because he did about 100 chairs short of Vince, so he needs 100 chairs in that box.
Yeah. Do you think, just before we end it, do you think we'll see Chris Jericho back in WWE at any point, whether it be Hall of Fame or whether it be for one last run?
Well, just very quickly, when we were talking about returns, he did a really good return at a Rumble one year. He came out on number 2 and Dolph Ziggler was number 1. So that was pretty cool. So I can see him coming back, maybe for a Rumble appearance, which would be pretty cool. And definitely somewhere down the line, Hall of Fame. He's got to be Hall of Fame. And Shawn Michaels would be perfect for me to induct him. So I think he will be back, maybe not a full run, but yeah, definitely Hall of Fame. Maybe, although I don't know, maybe a little run, but yeah, I think he will be back in some capacity, yeah.
Yeah, I think he'll get inducted into the Hall of Fame at some point. But obviously, it's not the be all and end all if he isn't, because, like, you know, a lot of wrestlers have said, you know, that the fans seem to get more caught up on the Hall of Fame than what wrestlers do. You know, some wrestlers take it to heart, like, you know, like an Undertaker, like that's a big, massive accomplishment for him, is to be obviously in the WWE Hall of Fame. But then, like, the likes of Bully Ray, he's turned around and said, you know, I'm not asked if I ever actually end up in the WWE Hall of Fame. It's not really a thing for me. So, and I can see Jericho probably wouldn't be too bothered, but I'd imagine he would be honoured if they did ask him. But I don't know whether I'd see him. It'd be cool after he's done with AEW if he did do like a Rumble appearance, maybe even like a one-off WrestleMania, just for old time's sake. Whether I actually see it happening, I don't think so. I think he's gonna, when he finally retires from in-ring, I think he's just gonna do a lot of backstage stuff with AEW. He seems to be from the get-go, Tony Khan's right-hand man.
Yeah. Do you think if or when, like, I don't want this to happen now, if or when AEW does a Hall of Fame, do you reckon Jericho could be a good prime first candidate?
Jericho should be number 1, yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
100%.
Like, it's far too soon to do it now, obviously, but yeah, down the line, I think he should be number 1, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, it's too early now. I mean, the company's 4 years old this year. But, you know, maybe if it gets like 10 years or whatever, you know, Chris Jericho would be retired by then, I'd imagine, anyway. And you know, with being the first AEW World Champion, like say, going and doing that match with Kenny Omega, then showed people that there is life outside the WWE, which then got the wheels turning for AEW. And you know, like, he wasn't the first member of the roster signed. Obviously, they had Cody, they had Kenny, they had the Bucks, they had like Christopher Daniels and Frankie Kazarian. They had quite a few already signed. But the one that everyone then started to take note of was when Chris Jericho signed. So, I mean, when you think of AEW, you think of Chris Jericho.
Yeah, and like you said, he is perceived to be Tony Khan's right-hand man in my eyes, the unofficial EVP, because you've got so many EVPs there, but Jericho is like literally so much knowledge in that nugget. Tony needs to go to him for like advice and stuff, which it seems like he does, which is good.
Yeah. And now we started to actually delegate some jobs around there, Tony, because I think that's where I wouldn't say downfall, because I don't think AEW's really hit many big downfalls really in the first couple of years. But it's where he's starting to learn. He needs to delegate more, by obviously giving Jerry Lynn and Stokely Hathaway Ring of Honor to start looking at. I think that's a perfect example of what he should be doing. And like Chris Jericho is going to be the perfect person for him, obviously, when he's done with being on screen, not just being a coach to other wrestlers. He can do so much backstage. He can learn from Tony Khan, and Tony Khan can learn so much from Chris Jericho. Like we said at the beginning, he's been in the industry for over 30 years now. He's had numerous world titles, numerous championships throughout numerous companies. He's had, is it 4 best-selling books? You know, so I mean, there's that much there that he can offer the likes of a Tony Khan. I think he'd offer more to Tony Khan than what he could to Vince McMahon.
I agree. Talking about books, I haven't read it and I haven't got it, but he's done the complete list of Jericho, which is a list of every single match he's done. And for someone to do that over 30 years, like he's talked about it on his podcast before, whatever, I'd want to get that so bad. But yeah, for him to keep a record like the matches over 30 years or whatever is unheard of, like literally unheard of. And it's obviously he's still got the paper that he's wrote it on and everything, and that book is going to be so interesting. But I have one question for you though.
Go on, then.
Do you ever think? Do you remember the feud that Dean Ambrose and Jericho had in WWE?
Mitch the Plan.
Yeah, and Dean Ambrose still owes money to Jericho for his coat. Is Jericho ever going to get that back? I mean, come on, John Moxley, Dean Ambrose, he can change his name, but he can't escape what he owes, can he?
Write him a check out of Tony Khan's back pocket. And we had Mitch the Plant as well, didn't we? The pot of plants got broke over his head and stuff. I mean, it was good. It was fun, and it worked for the version of the characters we had at the time. That sort of thing wouldn't work now for what we've got now. But like, every time they've been in the ring together, to me, it's been magic.
Yeah, and we've not even touched upon there's so like to talk about everything about Jericho would take 24 hours, 48 hours, but we've not even mentioned the Festival of Friendship. That was so good.
You know, that was one of the main talking points that I wanted to get to today as well. But yeah, the Festival of Friendship. When I was thinking of possibly doing like top 5 moments or top 10 moments before I come to just in the end doing a general chat at Chris Jericho, like I couldn't think really. If you're going off like one solo segment, I don't think there's a better one than the Festival of Friendship with Kevin Owens.
No, I agree, to be fair. Like, we were talking about promos earlier on. He did have a banging promo, or a few, actually, when he had the feud with CM Punk, and he was obviously bringing up about his drug-addicted sister, his alcoholic father. But even how good that was, those promos, I don't think they were even as good as the Festival of Friendship. That was literally perfection. Just how he turned over the board and he saw his name on the back. I was like, perfection.
The thing was, everyone knew it was coming. But when it happened, everyone still went, "Oh my God!" It's like, but Kevin Owens as well, like the whole gimmick and story that they did with Kevin Owens I was a bit disappointed at the beginning with KO when he won the Universal Championship. I like the way they done it, where Triple H screwed Seth Rollins and helped KO, and then he was sort of like his little man for a bit, wasn't he? But and then they made him sort of like a cowardly champion, which we'd seen KO come in, and the first thing he'd done up from NXT was take on John Cena and defeat him. So then him being a cowardly Universal Champion, I wasn't sure on. But then when they paired him with Chris Jericho, it worked so well. Like,
good.
So good. And then
I'm trying to think, which match was it where Jericho was suspended in a shark cage? I know it was Kevin Owens against someone, but I can't remember who he was against. I just remember watching. Like looking, I can't remember who he was against though, but yeah, Jericho in the shark cage, he was just pulling the Jericho faces. He was just so cool.
I can't remember who he faced now either, but I remember him talking about it afterwards, and he was like, "I was suspended above the air like a sexy pinata." What? But it was so good. But yeah, I mean, I really like that, and again, like I feel like that. Like you say, should have been higher off the WrestleMania card, and it should have been for the Universal Championship too. Obviously, Bill turned back up and squashed KO in like 3 seconds flat, which was unfortunate end to that. And I think obviously if Goldberg hadn't come back and Vince wanted to just keep putting the belt on him for absolutely no reason, that would have been for the world title. So it is unfortunate that it wasn't. But again, like if they do say like a Chris Jericho appearance or a Rumble match, hopefully he goes face to face with KO, because I would like to see just one more time them two, whether they work together or whether they just go at it again in the ring. I'd like to see Chris Jericho and Kevin Owens just one more time before it's all said and done.
That'd be pretty cool. And talking about Big Bill, obviously I saw you post that it's obviously having talk to come to AEW. Do you reckon we'll get a Jericho Bill Goldberg match in 2023, 2024 possibly?
I mean, if you ask Jericho, he'll tell you no, so that probably means
it'll happen next week,
Brilliant. Right, so I'll say we've probably touched on pretty much everything we wanted to touch on. So I think we're going to leave it there for now, but I'm sure we can revisit and maybe do a part 2 at some point. Again, there is that much to talk about with Chris Jericho. So as always, give us a like, give us a follow, subscribe to my YouTube channel, drop a comment, let us know your favorite Chris Jericho gimmicks, matches, anything Chris Jericho, me and Scott will have a look through them and reply to any of the comments that you leave. So as always, thank you for watching, and big thanks to Scott for coming on and being my first podcast guest.
Thanks for having me. It's been so much fun to talk about Jericho with another Jericho-holic.
Cheers. And like I say, there'll be more wrestling related content coming soon. I'll have more WWE 2K23 matches. I have bought the AEW Fight Forever, game, so I'll start uploading matches on that when that drops at the end of the month. I'll have more rankings videos dropping soon. And I've got another guest video which will be getting done in the next week, maybe 2 weeks. So, like I say, keep an eye out on the YouTube channel and keep an eye out on the Wrestling Group Facebook channel as well. We've got as much wrestling-related content as we can bring you, all coming soon. So, it's a bye from me.
It's a bye from me.
Cheers.